When I first started gaming, video games were drastically different than they are today. I mean, even the recently released platformers have changed so drastically since the 80s. It's just insane. It blows my mind. So back then, all I did was basically go from point A to point B, and then that was it. As games continued to evolve, I then fell into full-on story-driven games. Games like Mass Effect, Batman Arkham Asylum, Gears of War pulled me in like no game had before, and I could easily binge play a game late into the night just to see how things would end. Now, as I've gotten older, I realize why I was so drawn to these story-driven games, and why I got so engrossed in them, especially during the Xbox 360 era. It wasn't necessarily the gameplay every time, because some of the games that I really liked didn't have the best gameplay. And it wasn't necessarily the story either, because sometimes the stories weren't anything remarkable themselves, same old kind of thing. So then, what was it? What drew me in? And I realized it was the world building within these games. So, world building, as I'm describing it here, is the creation of a fictional world using methods other than plot. I loved Mass Effect because of the world, or rather the universe, that was created. All of the historical things that you would pull up, the dialogue with the characters, the planets, collections throughout, or just going through the different environments, collections of data, all the other stuff that brought this universe together like it was a real place. Batman Arkham Asylum took a familiar character to me and basically put me in the driver's seat. I was controlling him and gave that depth and that characterization there and built this world, even in just literally a building. You were in the asylum. Gears of War, look, let's be honest here, the dialogue was cheesy, and the muscular caricatures were pretty laughable. So why was I so engrossed in it? Because the world that was portrayed, these locust hordes that were just tearing through humanity and the cogs that had to fight him, and Marcus and his team, like, I wanted to find out what was going to happen to this world and the characters that lived within this world. World building truly is a difficult task, but if done well, it is quite beautiful. So today, I'm going to talk about my favorite world building games on my favorite current console, the Nintendo Switch. Janky platforming, questionable hitboxes, and well-known difficulties surround the Dark Souls series. Even though Dark Souls Remastered was my first Souls game that I ever played, I knew quite a bit about it. But what I never truly grasped was how it told a story. I mean, I guess I should have guessed since I had played Bloodborne before. The actual story in Dark Souls, the one that pushes the player forward, is nothing remarkable. Now, it's not bad, but it's not anything crazy good. However, the other story told is simply captivating. In this world full of demons, dragons, and hollow, there's so much more to understand. Though we know the very beginning of how this world started, how did it get to this specific point in time? And since time works differently here, at what point in time is it exactly? The locations traveled through, like the Asylum, Firestone Shrine, the Undead Parish, and all of the others, tell stories of sadness, pain, and loss. Yet in these areas filled with decay and depression, a simple flame in the darkness can be a literal and figurative sense of warmth, safety, and comfort. Heck, even the enemies in Dark Souls tell their own unique stories. The undead who attack you early on in the game. Why is it they attack you specifically? Have they simply devolved into a primitive form of themselves and are acting on pure instinct, one that is full of violence and hatred? What about the armored foes who appear to have had positions of exaltation and honor at some point in the past, before turning into the dark husks that assault you now? The buildings tell stories even. For instance, do Anor Londo and New Londo have some kind of relation? If so, what happened to New Londo that it would be a literal ghost town, while Anor Londo almost appears normal with its beautifully constructed cathedrals and gothic buildings? Everything in Dark Souls Remastered evokes wonder, curiosity, and intrigue, and there is a vast number of different pieces of lore that just build this world. Okay, so I was fine with the story told in Zelda Breath of the Wild. Would I say it is a masterpiece? No, not even close. The scattered nature of the memories and the brief glimpses into the past do not make up a story of the highest caliber. However, it's these same memories, blended with the environment that was created for the player to explore, that build a larger world that spans over many years. First, let's talk about the memories. In both the main game and the DLC, we see a Hyrule that appears to be quite the paradise outside of the looming evil that is Calamity Ganon. The champions are definitely heroic, but still flawed in their own ways. We see a portrayal of Zelda that is far from perfect and the shining beacon of hope we've come to expect over the years. We see a portrayal of Link who is still unsure of himself and unsteady in his resolution. But what's more than the character studies is the thriving world of Hyrule that is alluded to. It almost seemed like Hyrule was moving along without the help of Zelda and the royal family. Sure, they were the head honchos, but the average day to a Hylian seemed to be filled with normal activities. Farming, hunting, crafting, and so on. This is further grounded in the fact that there are still villages populated by people who aren't just focused on the chaos that took over Hyrule for a long time before Link awoke. Retail, friendships, and relationships, jobs, and various other everyday concerns fill the conversations and side quests throughout the game. You can buy a house. You can upgrade your equipment. You can figure out new and inventive ways to fish. Okay, we all tried bombing the fish and were pleased to find that it was quite effective. The old Hyrule and new Hyrule both show a resilient people who don't let something like a calamity keep them down. They continue to live their lives even in a world filled with evil. Then there's the environment to explore. Goodness, there are some neat areas in the game, and each area has its own distinct feel and story to tell. Traveling up a mountain to speak with an ancient creature feels like a journey in itself. First, you've got to make sure you have the right clothing. Then you need to make sure you're prepared for enemies that live within the cold. You prep with food items you've harvested from the land, you gather funding for clothing you need for the trip, or you find something out in the wild that will suffice. You traveled through hot desert, open fields, old ruins, mazes, and so many other locales. But who inhabited these areas before the world went to crap? Were the areas largely the same as they are now, but perhaps just exaggerated now that Calamity Ganon took over? How long have shrines been around, and what purpose did they serve beforehand? Sure, the story in Breath of the Wild can be seen as a bit lacking, and I wouldn't necessarily argue. But the land and memories of the past tell so many different, unique, cool, small stories and invoke such curiosity in the player that one can't help but to explore everything to try to uncover the truth. I'm sure this one will be controversial, but honestly, I love Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It wasn't because of the dialogue. I didn't mind the English dub and the Japanese was fine, but the dialogue itself could be a little interesting at times. The story, though I really enjoyed it overall in the end, had some pacing issues. I mean, it started strong, puttered out, then gained momentum, then drug on, then really got going in the latter half or last third to a great ending. Tropes be damned, I enjoyed the story in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but that's not what sold it to me. Neither did the gameplay, which had a steep learning curve and took a little bit to really get going, but turned out to be very fun. So why is this game one of my favorites on the Switch? Okay, come on, you know. The world and mythos built throughout the game simply captured my interest and didn't let go. In short, the world building. And what made it even more of a grab was that the world building didn't happen through just non-mainline storytelling. It was also expanded on with lovely visuals, exceptional Titan designs, and top-notch music. These elements help to give each area a unique feel, from the grandiose and awe-inspiring first moments in the fields of the Gormat province, to the majestic and solemn song that echoes through the halls of Indoline's sanctum. There are rural areas, rich areas, military-minded areas, areas in severe poverty. This world has so many different facets to it, and it truly shows. This drew me to keep exploring, keep taking side quests to give me another reason to scour the landscape and wonderfully crafted lands. And the mythos, everything is on the back of Titans, and there is a dense cloud sea that is essentially an air ocean. Okay, it sounds crazy when speaking about it, but it totally fits with everything in the game, dang it. This world that Rex and his friends traverse is interesting in so many ways outside of familiar side quests and item gathering. How in the world did everyone end up in the clouds? Is there something below the cloud sea? Where did the religious themes and stories stem from, which mimic many aspects of the Bible oddly, and are they true? What will people do if all the Titans die? How did there come to be various flora and fauna on each Titan? The world is so rich in wonder and mystery that I could not put it down until I finished the game. 140 hours later. Okay, who knew that 1, I would enjoy a roguelike game like Dead Cells as much as I do, and 2, that it would actually have a world that I really wanted to know more about? Well, okay, so it isn't necessarily a world that is built in Dead Cells, but more what appears to be an island. However, this island is the biggest, creepiest prison of all time. Dead Cells unfolds this disturbing, gruesome world through its gameplay. It's tough, demanding, requires you to be better, pushes you to try new things and learn to adapt. All of these can accurately describe this world. It's unpleasant, in short. But every time you die, it doesn't feel like a complete loss. In fact, it almost encourages you to keep trying, keep exploring, which in turn uncovers more little nuggets of information about this world. Why should you keep trying to make it further? Why do I keep respawning, and why do I appear to be a slime ball that inhabits a body somehow? Why are there corpses everywhere? Are they all mine? This is a world-building game that utilizes excellent gameplay to urge the player to keep playing and uncover more, with little nuggets of world-building and lore spread all throughout that you kind of have to find. Okay, seriously, Hollow Knight is one of my absolute favorite games of all time. Why? It's got tight gameplay, excellent mechanics, awesome bosses, difficulty that is tough but fair, and an art style that is wonderful to look at. But my favorite thing by far is the world that is built. Each location tells its own story without speaking a single word. Here's how it goes in Hollow Knight. You're thrown into an area without knowing what to do. You explore and learn how to navigate that area. You become an expert in how that area and its enemies works. Then your skills are put to the test with the boss, some optional, some mandatory. In a very similar fashion to Dark Souls, this game explains how things worked in this world through environments. These environments also invoke all sorts of emotions: wonder, intrigue, fear, all because the fictional world tells you how this world functions and how large it is. There's a feeling of space and depth in this world, and it's so awesome. For a specific example of what I mean by this, how the world is given a space, let's take the fast travel cutscene. This is such a small detail and it can easily be glossed over, but instead of just fading out when you want to fast travel to a different part of the map, and then fading back in, the game does something more. It shows you riding on the back of your newfound friend while he runs to the point you've selected. It's not just an instantaneous thing, it requires the knight to actually travel through the world. The world in Hollow Knight is demanding, dark, scary, and unrelenting, but it's also full of hopeful characters, beautiful areas in their own way, and a story that is just waiting to be unraveled. It's just so freaking good. Okay, this game is fantastic. I almost instantly became obsessed with Fire Emblem Three Houses. The best parts of the game for me actually didn't involve battles or ranking people up and reclassing them. It was the fantastic land of Fodlan and all its inhabitants and history that captured me. Everything in the game pointed back to this country rich in stories to be told, teaching students from all over the country with wildly different upbringings, working in a school that doubles as the church and all the tension that brings, the interactions between the various provinces and lords, the awesome art in between major events, and the narration that explains the seasons, history, and the landscape within Fodlan. It's all just so freaking awesome. The story was so good because of all of the other stuff that was explained. All the information that didn't necessarily have anything to do with the story directly, but made me actually care about what happened to Fodlan and the people at the school. I can recall so many aspects and stories outside of the main storyline, it's crazy. It's because it was so captivating. Fire Emblem Three Houses just oozes with stuff that is so interesting, full of different perspectives, and truly gives the feeling that Fodlan has so many different cultures that have to learn to coexist and grow together. I just wanted to know more and more about the history of this fictional world. This game, it's just it's just amazing. The world building is great.
I see you gather before me. Hungry, terrified, clutching your babes to your breast. Emperor Emir has marched his legions into our lands, laid siege to every fortress from here to the Blue Mountains. Rabid and ravenous, he bites and bites away. Men of the North, you stand at the precipice. Your kings have failed you, so now you turn to the gods. And yet you do not plead.
And finally, we talk about The Witcher 3, which is possibly the biggest game on the Nintendo Switch at the moment. Now, this game came out years ago, but now it's finally made its way to the Nintendo Switch. If you haven't played this game yet, you should really fix that. Whether it's on another platform or on the Nintendo Switch, you really should give it a try. It is pretty awesome. My favorite thing about this game, I went into it not knowing anything about Witcher 1 or Witcher 2. Right out the gate, it gives us a story, a brief history of what's happened so far. Gives us a little bit of information on what's going on in this world. Now, when it comes to fantasy games and kind of fantasy in general, for me, it has to be really, really, really captivating, otherwise I kind of move on, because I've always been a sci-fi guy, okay? This game captured me from the get-go. The characters are all detailed and have rich histories, some good, some bad, mixes all in between. This land that is inhabited by all of these people, both NPCs and the main protagonist, is just so captivating and so full of history, so full of culture, so full of mythology. It perfectly blends fantasy, like it's a dark fantasy that blends realism with fantasy, this fantastical look at the world with these crazy creatures, and it just blends it in together like it's real. All of this is done because of the environments, the landscapes, all the different types of landscapes there are. There are bogs, there are farmlands, there are broken down castles, there are lavish castles. The people that range from, people that are in poverty, that are living out in the wilds and just barely making it by, to people who are living it up in the castles in the main cities. There's a whole ecosystem, there's a whole culture within this game, and all of this adds into the story, which is good. It's very good, but it just adds into that story, making this the full package. This game might be my favorite on this list as far as world building, because it just goes in every way possible, just expands on anything that you can think of, in the side stories, in the side quests, in the main stories, in the environment, in the characters, in the visuals, in the music. Everything tells a story and builds this world up. I cannot recommend these games enough. If you own a Switch, or even another platform for a few of these games, I'd consider these must-buys. They utilize their environments, characters, and supplemental stories to tell and build a larger world that their respective stories live within. And the beauty of games that are excellent at world building is that they have the power to essentially override frustrating difficulty, scattered storytelling, steep learning curves, gameplay that isn't necessarily the best, repetition, and even seem to enhance what can be seen as the perfect game. Hey, and that's all for today. Thanks for putting up with my super long video and my opinions. I do want to know, what are your favorite world building games on the Switch and on other platforms? What are your favorites and why? I want to hear about this because I love world building games. Again, I'm Bauer Tendo. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.